Roll call for the city council meeting of Wednesday, October 5th, 2022 at 9 a.m. Ms. Allen, Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon.
We are now going to have our usual meditation. First of all, I want to acknowledge members of Erie's Jewish community on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. I also want to ask us to think about those who have been impacted not only by Hurricane Fiona, but in Puerto Rico, still dealing with Fiona, and then Ian, anybody in Erie. We have a lot of Erie people who are snowbirds, so we think of those who are victims and those who are cleaning up. And I'm going to ask Mo Troop to give a reflection on Jackie Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Madam President. For those of you who don't know, recently, please remember the Ratcliffe family as they lost Jackie Ratcliffe Brown. She was Erie Police for 31 years. She retired as the highest ranking black officer in Bureau history. She was a deputy chief of police. She was Erie's first black person to ever hold that rank. She was also a relative of mine. She's a cousin of mine. So please remember the family and those community members that loved her, and the Erie Police Department that were her colleagues.
Thank you. Michael?
Were you going to say something now? Could we please stand for a moment of silence? Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you today, first of all, grateful for assembling us in these chambers today, Lord. We ask that you help us by your Spirit to make prudent and good decisions on the behalf of our city, oh Lord. Lord, we ask that you look on our brothers and sisters in Florida and in the Caribbean. We ask that you send them the help that can't be given by man. And we just ask that in your name, that you remember those who mourn, remember the late deputy chief, remember all those others who are mourning in our town today, and those who lost loved ones due to the storm. And we just ask this in your name. Amen.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a motion to approve the minutes from the Wednesday, September 21st meeting and bills for payment on October 7th and 14th, 2022. Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen.
Thank you, Lori. Now we have at least one presentation, possibly two, before our public hearing at 9:30. So, Mr. Witherspoon.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Hopefully everyone in the city of Erie know about the Spoons Basketball League. We've been operating 32 years. 32 years we have not had any major incident or issues, fighting, shooting of any kind. And that is all due to Erie Police Department. Their presence were known. The individuals, adults, parents have said, thank you, Mel. And I tell them, don't thank me, thank the Erie Police Department. So I would like to make a presentation to the officers that were on their job protecting our young ones.
We got Max.
I would like to have the officers please come forward. And this is, the first one would be
Max.
Maxwell. Max. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. Okay. Officer McClellan was not able to be here today, and we will give it to his fellow officer, and I'm sure he'll receive it. If not, we'll tell the chief about it. Trolling Mike Atala. Thank you, sir. He drank a lot of Gatorade. Trolling Dave Smith. He didn't take no stuff. He beat me one-on-one, though. Corporal Sean McGill. Thank you, sir. He let me know that he was a corporal. These gentlemen, we had some hot days, and they were there all the time, protecting our kids. Chief, would you please come forward? Some time ago, we lost a patrolman, Jason Bolton. And it touched me. And I decided to give the police department an award, a plaque, in honor of Jason. I asked the police, do you decide who gets it, what they do in their job, and let the police department pick an individual to receive that award. This is the award that I'm giving until the day I die. Chief?
On behalf of the police department, we'd like to offer our sincerest appreciation to Councilman Witherspoon for creating this. It was 1 year ago this very month that we lost Jason. After we lost him, we knew that we had a great unit out there doing the bicycle patrol downtown, and they made lots of contact. And after Jason passed, we realized tenfold what he was doing out there every day as we spoke to different business owners, citizens that were approaching us for months on end about how they missed him and his interactions he had with them. It was very special. I'd like to recognize Mr. and Mrs. Belton, who are here in the audience today with us. I told them when I came in this morning that last night I had the privilege of going to the Warner Theater to see the President's own United States Marine Band here in Erie. And they said they hadn't been here in 25 years. And I said, I bet you I know a Marine. I told them they better get to Erie. So we want to make sure we thank Jason for that. But in recognition of this award, the Jason Belton Community Policing Award, we have determined that the candidate, the officer that should receive it this year would be none other than his bicycle partner, Max Brozell. Come on up, Max.
words today. First and foremost, I would like to thank my Lieutenant Jamie Russo. His continued support means everything to us. Belton was his #1 fan, and he loved him deeply. I would also like to thank Chief Spizzarni, Deputy Chief Marucci, Captain Anthony Tallarico, Deputy Chief Laura, and Inspector Janis. Additionally, I'd like to thank Councilman Mel Witherspoon for the recognition he gives our unit and for always being in our corner. I know that this has been an extremely difficult year for the Belton family and all of Belton's loved ones, and I appreciate your presence here today. Coming up on the 1-year anniversary of our brother's passing, and looking back, I have to say that I don't feel deserving of this award, though, because during my time working with Jason Belton, I got to see what true community policing looked like. And although I strive every day to do my best to fill that role, I know I'll always fall short in his shadow. He left a giant hole in all of our lives and was a light in everyone's life he interacted with. We can all hope to deliver half the level of service to the community that Jay Belts did. Not only was he my partner, but he was a great friend, and it's an honor to receive this award. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mel. That was amazing. We're all leaving here with really inspiration. I think we have time for one more presentation. It's going to be Curtis Jones from the Erie Regional Chamber. Previously, the person who held Curtis's position previously at the Chamber used to give us quarterly updates in caucus, but I thought it would be a good idea to have those updates shared with the public at large. So Curtis, if you want to come up, and keep in mind that we're going to have a public hearing at 9:30. So we should be able to get that in by time.
Yes,
by
ma'am.
that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council, administration, Renee, and the mayor in his absence, my good friend, the controller, and just for all of you that are here, and Lori, I just, before I say this, and I'll be very brief, and if I need to stay after later for questions, or I'm available via email or phone call for questions that I don't get to in this short presentation, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Witherspoon for always recognizing that people need to be recognized. And that's something that we don't always do well, not just in our community, but just in general. Recognizing Deputy Chief, I would say Ratcliffe, that's family for me as well. And also for our police department for striving to be better for and striving to be better with our community. And I think we need to recognize that when it's happening, because we will recognize it when it's not. And so I appreciate what I experienced this morning. So at this moment, I'm standing here as a representative and the Director of Government Affairs for the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership, a position that I have been in for 3 long months. And I'm still learning the process, learning what was, learning what is, and striving to make what will be better than what was. And so just a brief update on some of the things that we have going on. And again, I don't have the time, nor do we, is this probably the setting for all the detail. But just a few things that we have been doing under the direction of James Grunke, the CEO, and our vice president, our vice presidents, Jake Rao and Leslie Ridge Allen. We have continued to reach out to, we have a goal of at least 250 outreaches to businesses throughout Erie County, the city, the county, and beyond, and expand it out into the region. We are well on pace to surpass that by the end of the calendar year, and for sure by the end of our fiscal year. And it's interesting because there's so many businesses that have come up post-COVID, and many of them don't have brick and mortar, but still have needs, and we're working to, with our outreach team, to be able to contact them and to say, hey, what is it that you need? How can we support you? How can we help you build the infrastructure for sustainability and the work that you need to do to add your company's value to our community? So we're continuing to do that with our outreach team. We've had several and will continue to have several networking and outreach opportunities for current members of the chamber, but also for those who are interested in being members of the chamber, because we feel that there are certain resources that are available that if you don't know, you can't access. And we want to be better at giving the access to all of those companies and businesses and even aspiring entrepreneurs in our community to be able to have the access to whether it be funds, whether it be training, whether it be a mentorship, whatever those needs are to be successful. We want to be the institution and the organization in the community that is a part of that growing and development process. We're excited because on October the 19th, that week is going to be very busy for us as an organization. The Canadian Consul General is going to be in Erie, and we'll be having a roundtable conversation with him, his staff, and multiple businesses in the Erie region that are doing business with Canada, that have the capacity and the desire to do some business with Canada. And so we're going to talk about how do we do that exchange. It's interesting that another country is closer than other parts of our state. And so we want to maximize those relationships, and we're working to do that. And I know the Consul General will be in other places throughout the course of that day. But if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me, and I know there's going to be a legislative breakfast at the Manufacturers and Building and Business Association that morning as well. So you may be more interested in going to that event. But either way, reach out and let me know. So we're excited about that. One of the things we just did last week was a manufacturing career fair at Zim Zim on West 38th Street. And it was a career fair focused on manufacturing, and we had 16 manufacturing businesses that were there that had over 200 jobs available. I mean, like if you had a resume, you could do an interview on the spot. If you didn't, you could take a card and go in the next day and set up. So we were very happy about the success of that. It was the first time that we've done anything like that as an organization. And we had close to 150 people there, not just general what kind of jobs are out there, people that are interested in manufacturing jobs. So it was a very focused and successful event. And we're going to continue to spill out and do those types of focused career fairs on specific career areas. So our next one that we're looking to possibly do is healthcare. And then we're going to look at hospitality. We're going to just expand out and do specific and focused career fairs so that when you might get 1,000 people in the room and have 100 different types of businesses, but that's not as effective as a focused session. And so we're looking to do that. Also, and I don't know what my time is at, and I am rushing through this. Council President, this is difficult for me to stay on my bullet points, but I'm doing pretty well, I hope. Our biggest and most significant event as an organization thus far has been our homecoming event, and that also is going to be the same week that the Consul General is going to be in town. That event is going to be October 20th and 21st, Thursday and Friday, at the Convention Center. There's a myriad, I don't have the time to give you all the details, but it's exciting because we're going to do some things this year that we haven't done. It's not only going to be focused on business development, businesses, economic development. We're going to do all of those things that are core and anchor for our organization, but we're also taking the opportunity to focus on the importance of DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and combining that with the challenges that we're dealing with around workforce. And so we're doing multiple panels, multiple conversations that have a broader context than just traditional brick and mortar traditional business acumen, business development kind of models. We're doing all those things, but we're also going to be highlighting, again, how DEI infused into organizations and businesses organically, not forced, not because we're checking a box, but how you integrate that into the culture of your business and even the culture of our community will help us to be more successful.
I think that's good, Curtis.
Yep.
I
Okay.
appreciate it. I know how difficult
Yeah.
it is for you, but this is our first attempt. I think the last time we had a fail, so now
Yeah.
that we have a format down, we'll see you in another quarter, and
Well, this is what I'll
hopefully it
do.
won't happen on the same day as a public
Yeah.
hearing, though.
Well, thank you. So this is what I do. I know we have the time, so thank you for the time. I do have more information. I will send an email to the group. I know that a couple of you had questions about homecoming, and you can feel free to text me, call me, and we can get those things handled. So thank you for the time, and I will be back before the quarter, so I can do a stronger heads up.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Okay. We will turn to our Deputy Solicitor, Kathy Doyle, to lay out the information on how the public hearing will proceed.
Madam President, did you receive the letter from Ms. Alexander?
Yeah, Chuck Nelson is going to read that into the record. Kathy.
We have a fair public hearing if folks, because of religious reasons, aren't here. Is there some way that we can take this to the next meeting? Yom Kippur is like in her letter. It's like Christmas.
No, we're going to
Christians.
put her into the record, okay?
That's not my
And we
point.
are,
My point
but
is,
Ed, no, we're going to have the public hearing today. We are not voting on
On
this
your
today.
head.
The person can also speak when we vote on this. So, no, we are not going to change the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Now is the time for a public hearing with respect to an application for waterfront conditional use that's been submitted by Loomis Park Opportunity Fund for construction of 2 multiple-family buildings totaling 16 units located at 102 Poplar Street. Just by way of background, prior to the hearing before City Council, the application is reviewed by the Design Review Committee. On August 3rd, 2022, the Design Review Committee recommended to approve the building and site design as being consistent with Section 306 of the zoning ordinance. Then the application goes before the Planning Commission. And on August 16th, 2022, the City of Erie Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the proposed development based on consideration of the factors that are set forth in zoning sections 306. What is to be considered by the City Council today is whether the proposed development complies with Article 306 of the zoning ordinance, which talks about buildings being consistent and harmonious with the existing structures in the area and where the proposed development is to occur. So the hearing will commence with witnesses for the applicant to set forth the proposed development, and then any opposition that is here present today, we will hear from them, and then Councilman Nelson will review the letter into the record. So at this time, the witness for the applicant could be sworn in by the court reporter. Is it via Zoom or, okay.
Sir, if you'd raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you may proceed with your presentation. Could you state your full name for the record?
Yeah, thank you everyone for having me here. Thank you. My name is Matthew Frombeluti. I'm a senior project manager at ISA in Philadelphia.
And
where
I'm going to
our
stop.
firm
I'm going to stop
that
you.
specializes in-
Can you spell your
sorry,
name
can
for
you
the?
hear me?
Yes, but I'm stopping you briefly. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Yeah,
full-
my name is Matthew.
Spell your. I'm sorry. Spell your last name.
My last name is Frombeluti, F as in Frank, R-O-M-B-E-L-U-T-I. BOLUTI.
Okay, and if you could slow down just a little bit. You may proceed.
Sure. Hi. Would you like me to share my screen? I have the presentation here.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. So as I said, my name is Matthew Frombaluti. I'm an architect at ISA in Philadelphia. We're a firm that specializes in multifamily and single-family housing. We've done projects mainly in Philadelphia, but also elsewhere in Pennsylvania, Detroit, Indianapolis, quite a number of places. So this development is at, pardon me. This development is at 102 Poplar Street in the Waterfront District. You can see where it is. It's between 2nd Street and Front Street. Technically, it's on Poplar Street, but it has two frontages along 2nd Street and Front Street, and it's right up against the bluff that looks over the marina and to Lake Erie. So it's a very nice site with some great views of the lake. The site itself, like I said, on 2nd Street and Poplar Street, the entire lot does not go all the way to Front Street. There is a small lot here that is shaped like an L that is owned by the Port Authority. So this particular lot only frontages on 2nd Street and Poplar Street. So for the design of the lot, we decided to split it up into two separate buildings. And our goal here was to maintain some density, to get to 16 units and maintain some density for the neighborhood, but also to present a front to the neighborhood that was more in line with the character. So kind of a single family, lower slung house that would look more in line with what's going on in the neighborhood. So we have two buildings here. One building, by the way, this is Poplar Street on the right side and 2nd Street on the south side. So one building, which is the 12-unit multifamily building, is a 3-story building with 12 units in it in a single stair. Units are split up mainly between 2 bedrooms and 1 bedroom, although there is 1 studio unit. And then there is a 4-unit building here along 2nd Street. I'm calling it a building because it is technically 1 building, but it's arranged as 4 townhouses. So these are 4 2-story townhouses that read kind of from the street as 4 individual houses. And between these 2 buildings is a surface parking lot that enters off of Poplar Street with 22 spaces, which is more than 1 per unit. All of their criteria, I guess, for this fall in line with the zoning code, including the setback, which is equal to the houses that are next door, and the setbacks around the rest of the lot. And as I said before, there is a lot up here that is part of the Port Authority. So Front Street is actually a little bit to the north of this, and there's some grass and a tree to the north. So this is a section that is taken north-south through the building, and you can see the scale of these houses. So the townhomes on the left side that abut Front Street are 2 stories tall, about 30 feet, at their top with the peaked roof. The multifamily building, which is the 12-unit building, is 3 stories tall. All of the units are flat, about 45 feet to the very top of the pitched roof here. We're showing mechanical area that is actually not necessary, so the entire roof will be pitched, and you won't see any mechanical units on the roof at all. For the floor plans here, the yellow ones here are the multifamily, and you can see they're pretty straightforward. We have a number of Type B units, fair housing compliant on the first floor. There are 1-bedroom studio. And then on the 2nd and 3rd floor, we have 2-bedroom units and 1-bedroom units as well. The 1-bedroom units are about 500 square feet. The 2 bedrooms are 900, slightly under 900 square feet. The townhomes, each one is a stacked box, which is 2 stories tall. They're about 1,000 square feet or slightly over that in terms of usable space. There's a living room on the first floor and then 2 bedrooms on the upper floor. So they are all 2-bedroom bi-level townhouses. So this is a rendering of the design. This is taken from Front Street, so facing the lake. Our overall and you'll see the same materials being used on the frontage that faces Second Street as well. So our materials that we're mainly using are a shingle, a fiber cement shingle here that would be dark colored, and then a wood siding, a natural wood siding as an accent. That would be a lighter colored wood. So you can see we have balconies facing the lake because obviously there's some really fantastic views there. We want to maximize that. Each unit has its own balcony. There's a large eave that goes over, as well as some metal decoration that kind of integrates with the rest of the eave to make it look a little bit more built into the building rather than the balconies that are often just stuck on the side of the building. Going to the Second Street frontage, and please let me know if I'm going too quickly here, but this is the Second Street frontage that faces Second Street, obviously. You can see the 4 individual units here. They're townhouses, or townhouse style. Each one is 2 stories tall with pitched roof, fiber cement shingles, black shingles, and a small porch area with wood siding on it in the front. Each unit has a patio and a landscaped, lawn in the front, so that it can be a little bit more in line with what is going on it's kind of in line with what's going on in the neighborhood, where each house has its yard where they can personalize and do things like that. These are the elevations, which are just going through the materials and the views that I kind of just showed you before. And finally, these are the site plans from the civil engineer showing the overall layout of the lot with the parking spaces, a small patio over here to be used as a common space. So as I said again, every single unit here has a balcony or a front yard of some sort. There's a transformer which I believe will not actually be required for this project, so there'll be some more green space there. And then some landscaping here showing, proposed landscaping for these areas, although I think the patios can be determined. We'll be a little bit more open. And then some tree screening at the sides of the parking lot. And that is the end. I'll just kind of rewind here for the frontage on Second Street, but that's the brief presentation I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions or hear comments.
Okay. Any questions from council?
Once it's all built, who will maintenance the landscaping in the parking lot? Because Erie does have a large population of elderly and disabled individuals, so I'm concerned when snow comes, who's going to be responsible for making sure that parking lot is nice and clear for people to get out?
Yeah, this is a privately owned, and these apartments will be rentals. So I believe that the maintenance of the parking lot and clearing it from snow will be done by the building maintenance.
This question is for the administration. Does this meet our waterfront height requirements or limitations?
It's been approved by the City Planning Commission, so the ordinance says views shall, as feasible as can, views shall be preserved. And the city, obviously the Planning Commission did approve it.
Do these units fall under LRTA? They get the full 10-year exemption? Madam President?
Yes.
Yes, they are. Okay.
On average, what are our rent prices going to roughly range for the studio and then up to the 1-bedroom and then the 2-bedroom, please?
I can't personally answer that. It would be with the market rate for the area.
I'm happy to give that information if I can speak. This is Philip Jesue, I'm the developer. The price range will be from approximately $1,000 for the smallest unit, maybe in the low 1,000s,
Excuse me, Mr.
to
Jesue.
about $2,000 for the largest.
Excuse me, can we have you sworn in before you testify, please? This is Catherine Doyle, the solicitor.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely, Catherine, sorry.
thank you. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Mr. Jezue, do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So the rental rate for the apartments will be anywhere from the low $1,000 for the studio to approximately $2,000 for the largest townhome.
Mr. Jezue, I just wondered if you could tell us, you've had another development, if you could just, that's already up and occupied, I believe. How did that influence your decision to do additional development in the West Bayfront area? Or did it influence your decision?
No, it did actually. It was a pleasant surprise. It was, there was a lot of demand, and we have 11 new residents living in downtown right now, 11 people who were formerly either lived in the suburbs or lived in different places and relocated to Erie. So, and those people love being downtown, they love being on the lake, and they are paying, you know, rents that are in the ranges that I just described to you. So, part of my decision to move forward with this was based on the great reception that we had at that project, and you know, in general, the demand and desire for people either around Erie or who are moving to Erie to live downtown.
Any other questions from council?
No more questions. At this time, we will take testimony from any opposition that are present here today.
Do you want me to read this into the record now?
No, we're going to have
After the in-person check, okay?
We'll have live testimony first. Okay. Could you?
My name is Freda Tepfer. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie.
And if I could stop you, yeah, you need to be, this is a public hearing,
Right,
so you
yeah.
need to be sworn. Go ahead.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes. I lived for a year at 2nd and Poplar, and I regularly walk on the bayfront, and I am confronted with the view of the building that's already been built. This is the waterfront special zone, so the landowner or the proponent isn't automatically entitled to the approval of this project. When I worked for the U.S. Forest Service, one of the members of our interdisciplinary teams, when it was important, was to have a landscape architect. So when I was in Cedro Woolley, looking down the alley, all the way down the highway, Highway 20, at the possible views of our clear cuts, proposed clear cuts, the landscape architect modeled how that was going to appear, the different alternatives. I doubt that the Planning Commission has really thought about how this impacts the view for the neighborhood, how it impacts the view of the sunset, the airflow, such things as that. I think the city needs to have a methodology to actually assess what is the impact of the view within the neighborhood. I didn't notice in the drawing curb ramps. I would assume that's going to be required. There's going to be an increase in the traffic there, so that's going to impact pedestrians crossing Poplar Street and crossing 2nd Avenue. We don't have a traffic mitigation ordinance. If we did, that might be addressing it. The nature of the vegetation proposed is not forward-looking, is not the kind of thing that would be biologically forward-looking, nor would it be great for stormwater management. There's large windows close to the water, and this could be an opportunity for the proponent to put in bird-safe windows. There's a lot of large windows, but there's no effort to do that. So I think that the city ought to be looking at a professional assessment of how this affects views. I don't really believe the Planning Commission possesses the expertise to do that, and I think that this should be a place where there be forward-looking design and maximum preservation of the view within the neighborhood. And I tell you, it looks ugly when you're looking up at those new buildings from Liberty Park and Niagara Pier area. Thank you.
Any other witnesses to oppose in person? Okay. Councilman Nelson, you will now read the letter in opposition into the record, please.
Do I need to swear in or anything like that?
No.
Great. All right. This is from Leslie Alexander. She's a neighbor, and it's Yom Kippur, so she was not available to be here on this major Jewish holiday. She writes, I am writing today with 2 points of concern regarding the public zoning meeting on Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. My first point is that I would like to file an objection to the proposed project to be situated at 102 Poplar Street. My primary concern is that the proposed multi-family dwelling, a euphemism for an apartment complex, will obstruct the view of the bay for our West Bayfront residents and those walking along West 2nd Street. I believe that this would be a violation of the zoning code. If I am mistaken and there is no longer such a code, I'd welcome being directed to the documentation of this change in practice. My second point relates to the scheduling of the public zoning meeting on Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. The Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur falls on October 5th this year. Yom Kippur is the holiest of the holiest days for Jews. Scheduling a public meeting on this day is anti-Semitic. It is akin to scheduling a meeting on Christmas Day, which, as we all know, does not always fall on a Sunday. Yet on Christmas, the city does not conduct business. I was of the belief that the city was committed to supporting inclusion and diversity. There are any number of ways to determine dates for major and minor holidays for the residents of Erie. In a city that purports to have such a commitment, it is of no cost to the city to practice respectful inclusion and not simply write about this in its merits. Leslie Alexander.
Does the applicant want to respond or provide any supplemental testimony?
Sorry, are you asking if I would like to respond to any?
If you care to provide any redirect at this point.
I think I would just say for the views, we certainly don't want to upset anyone's views of the lake. There's currently a house, a two-story house on the spot that the multifamily building will be going, and there's a large tree a little bit to the north of it. So I think that the overall change for the views won't be quite as drastic as some people might be imagining right now.
Okay. Thank you. Any follow-up questions from council?
Anything else?
I have one question. Would this project go forward without LRTA? Hello?
Without what? I'm sorry?
He's asking about LRTA. I'm not
It's probably best if the developer responds it, because it's not a design-related question. And I would say no. It's the tax rates along the Bay and Erie are very costly, and the rents that I have described to you are still very low by national standards, but the construction costs are the same or maybe a little bit higher than national standards. So economically, it's still very challenging to develop in Erie. It's nice to see that there's demand for the stuff that's being built downtown, but these are not wildly profitable projects, and I don't think that without the LRTA, I don't know that I would do another project, and I don't see anybody else developing, so I think it would be premature to end LRTA if you want to promote development downtown.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will close the hearing. I could proceed, Madam. Oh, did you?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Proceed.
Correct me. So did you receive a variance for height for the multi-unit? I'm just going from recollection, but I thought the maximum height was 35 feet.
No, there was no variance for height. I think we have it in the presentation what the height limit is, but we are under the height limit for this particular area.
The ordinance says, Jake, you're here. Can you come up and talk about the zoning, whether a zoning variance occurred? Jake Welsh is the zoning hearing officer for the city of Erie.
Good morning. Jake Welsh, Chief Zoning Officer for the city of Erie.
Excuse me, do you need him sworn?
Yes, go ahead.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yeah, as previously mentioned in the recommendation from the Planning Commission, the zoning office had certified that all of the zoning requirements are being met as far as lot and yard requirements, so lot coverage, building height, building setbacks, landscaping requirements, screening requirements for the parking lot, those are all being met.
So what is the maximum height for building?
Let me refer to that. So for multi-unit development, in the WR district, we use the R3 lot and yard requirements, which includes the maximum height. So the maximum height in this case is 50 feet. That's the max allowance for a multifamily dwelling in WR.
Could I make a quick comment as well?
Proceed.
There are a few buildings, including our two direct neighbors, that are also 3-story multi-unit buildings in similar height and similar height to the one that we were proposing as well.
Okay. All right, I think this does conclude the hearing then. We may close the proceedings. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Welsh.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Lori, now we do repository sales.
Is there anyone present that wishes to speak on a repository sale? Anyone here for a repository sale? Anyone here for a repository sale? I think we could go to public comments.
Public comments.
My name is Freda Tepfer. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie. My undergraduate and graduate education was in soil science. I worked for 12 years for the U.S. Forest Service in watershed management. I worked in Snohomish County, involved in environmental, looking at permitting in environmental purposes, and I worked related to water quality. So I have a long history as well. I was the citizen representative to a non-point pollution plan for the Stillaguamish watershed, which was one of the early action non-point watersheds in Washington State in the mid-'80s. I'm here to speak about the stormwater fee. So this is something that really is long overdue in Erie. We had, when I worked for Snohomish County, there had been a stormwater utility in place in the 80s. We had a death related to flooding on the southeast side, or the kind of central east side, I think about 3 years ago. We've had flooding in the last storms. As I walk my neighborhood, I see the water ponding, and some of it is to do with the not forward-thinking landscaping that residences use, but it's also due to the fact that there's really no incentive for residences to not pave over their lawns, as I see in my neighborhood. But it's really past time to have a stormwater utility in the city of Erie, to have a fee. And I understand that there are many burdens placed on homeowners, but we are looking at a maximum annual fee of $36 for the largest group of residences. The largest group would be a $36 annual fee, which is far lower than most other jurisdictions in the state. But the advantage of having this fee is we are going to collect fees from all commercial and nonprofit properties. A third of the tax-based properties in the city, I believe I've heard, are nonprofits. It's time that they chip in for this stormwater management. We need to have improved maintenance of storm drains. We need to have education. There's just much that can be done. And I really appreciate the efforts of the credit committee. There really is, as they said, it's only a labor of love if a resident installs a good practice, because they're not going to get much credit. But I hope we have an education program that really highlights the advantages to the homeowners as well as the environment of doing other than just a lawn and not paving your lawn. Do I have time left? Yeah. Okay, so I just want to remind you, we don't have a traffic mitigation ordinance. There ought to be a look at how an impact like a development going in, this residential development, the proposed IRG, how will these things impact our traffic? And had we a traffic mitigation ordinance, we could be collecting fees for that. We need better management of street closures for pedestrian access, and I think the city needs an ordinance for that. It's really, how long is the cathedral at 10th and Sass going to be allowed to close the sidewalk? It's a shame. I agree very little with Erie Downtown Development Corporation on much of what they do, but I will say they make an effort to provide pedestrian bypass. There is no reason that Tom Hagen couldn't have done that on 6th Street with his residential projects. There's no reason that it couldn't be done with all the things that's going on between Cathedral Prep and that cathedral. And I want to remind everybody in the city that you have until October 17th to fill out the public parks and land survey. This is a good time to look at the parks in your neighborhood. Where are their sidewalks lacking? Where are their water fountains and restrooms lacking? Thank you.
Thanks, Freda.
Good morning. My name is Deacon Barry Clark. My address is 2035 East 19th Street. And I want to thank you, City Council members, for all the work you're doing beautifying Erie. I gave you guys a break in September. but I'm coming to every city council meeting until I see some satisfaction on my street. I see beautification all over the city of Erie. 2 blocks away from my house, they did some street work. The last meeting I was here, the mayor said there was a surplus of $1 million. The city came through and filled 5 potholes on my street. That don't sound like $1 million. I just want my street to be repaired. No work has been done since Mayor Savacchio. I don't even have a sidewalk on my street. I love the presentation they got on Poplar and 2nd Street. They have sidewalks. I don't have one. My tax dollars pay just like everybody else. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, I know we don't usually answer people, but I did ask Public Works. I gave them your address and asked them to follow up on, because I know you've been coming faithfully and making this request. So hopefully we'll get some answers and some satisfaction for you, okay?
Thank you very much.
Curtis Jones, I'm here again just to close out what was not time for me to close out previously. I figured this would be an appropriate time to do that. Curtis Jones, I'll give my work address because that's what I'm representing, 1128 State Street, Erie Regional Chamber Growth Partnership. In relation to the homecoming event that I mentioned, which is our organization's largest event annually, we're, again, doing a lot of different things, looking to showcase not just the business community and the economic development work that's being done, which we will herald and celebrate, but also we're recognizing what we're calling quality of life organizations and groups that are a part of our community. So we can talk about doing business development and economic development work and brick and mortar, but there are organizations, businesses, and groups that help the intangible needs and meet intangible needs of our citizens as well. And again, we're calling that quality of life. So for example, the Powell Police Athletic League is going to be recognized, going to have an opportunity to tout what they do. PACA, MCIC, other organizations that are doing great work in our community to, again, accentuate the brick and mortar and business work that's going to be done so that our community can be as well-rounded as it can be. Also, another thing that we're doing, this is the first time historically for the chamber that I know of, and it was articulated to me the other day that it is, we have been able to set up a scholarship for BIPOC businesses in our community that are not members, but we feel would benefit from what the chamber has to offer, but may not have the money to attend this event, the $250 or whatever it may be, or they are very small businesses and $250 to spend it on something they don't know about is probably more of the issue. And so what we're doing is we're scholarshiping at least 20 BIPOC businesses this year to attend both days of the homecoming. And so I'm actively working with Erie's Black Wall Street and a few other in my own network, and I offer that out to those on council. I make no promises that all that you may recommend will be scholarshiped, but the effort is there, and this is the first year that we are doing that, and so I'm excited about that. So I wanted to share that as more important work that the chamber is doing in recognizing that what has been done may have not been good enough, and so we're making the effort to do more and to do better and to be a greater partner in many different ways in the community. So again, thank you for my citizen to be heard time. Well, that's old school, I'm sorry. That's the old language. What is it now? It's public comment. So thank you for the time for the public comment. If there's any questions, I don't know if this is a good time or not, or if I'm pushing the privilege, but if there are questions and you can ask them, I can entertain them now, since I have a couple minutes left.
I don't have a question, but I'll be reaching out to you with a list of businesses that I think would be a great asset. Great,
thank you. Again, I'm available at the chamber, cjones.eriepa.com, and most of you have my phone number, so feel free to contact me and let me know how we, as the chamber, can help you do what you do well for our city, and have those valid exchanges. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in chambers who would like to speak?
Good morning, members of council. My name's Otto Pasquale. I live at 3930 Walker Boulevard. I come here today to bring an issue of our street at the corner of 38th and Liberty, West 38th and Liberty. I have some pictures that I took late the other night. You'll have to excuse the size of them. I have an Android phone, not an iPhone. I typed this up kind of briefly. So, members of City Council, I come here today to speak to you on behalf of an issue that I feel is of importance, to see what can be done to control the traffic that the new Sheetz and other businesses on the corner of Liberty and 38th Street will bring. As of October 3rd, there has been 2 car accidents that I know of. If you are at the corner of Liberty and 38th going north, there is a turning lane, but no turning signal indicator, only a solid green light. The same goes for the other directions. 4 weeks ago, I was the passenger in a rear-end hit-and-run car accident. We were at the red light at 38th and Liberty, facing east, when we were hit from behind and pushed into the car ahead of us, only 3 blocks from my house. To just have our police force monitor this intersection is great for a temporary fix, but it doesn't really solve the problem. It would only be a matter of time till someone is seriously injured or loses their life at this intersection. If action can be taken to prevent this from happening or of such worse matters, now is the time to fix it. I like to see the traffic division do some type of monitoring during the morning, afternoon, and evening hours, and also on weekends. Would be really great if some turning light signals could be installed along with no turn on red. Thank you for your time. I have those pictures there if anybody wants to see them. If anybody wishes to call me, please feel free. We can walk down. It only takes a couple minutes to get there. Thank you.
Mr. Pasquale, I want to thank you for coming in. I want you to know that you're not the only person who has brought this to our attention. The Sheetz is a beautiful edifice there, but right now it's like playing the Dodgems. If you remember the Dodgems of Waldemer, you pull into that parking lot, you just say, "Son, do and pray," because you're going to be in trouble. And I already talked to the chief about it. They will do something, hopefully as quick as you want them to, but it'll happen. And thank you for your time.
Frank, we have one person waiting to speak, I believe, online. Is that correct? Sheila?
Good morning, members of council. I'm Sheila Ellen Woger. I reside at 2011 Fairmount Parkway here in the city of Erie, Pennsylvania. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, when I heard Mayor Schimber say that the homeless people don't want houses, I find it ironic that we're building on the west side, but we can't build on the east side. I would like to know what people he spoke to that made that statement, because I know when I experienced homelessness, the thing that I wanted most was a house of my own. I would like to ask members of council if you visited the Refuge, the homeless shelter on East 26th Street that houses up to 6 families in one house. Have you visited the Erie Community Shelter Services on the west side that houses men, women, and children? I'm sure they would say something differently. They would want a house to live in. I find it ironic that we can tear down houses on the east side and put a park in its place when we have a homeless population here in Erie. Also, I would like to bring into question 4 ordinances that were passed most recently this year. Council File number 16286, where monies was appropriated to the Insurance Fraud Prevention Authority. Council File number 16287, an ordinance that money was provided to the Auto Theft Prevention Authority. Also, Council File number 16289, where there's money from Housing and Urban Development that is going to the Insurance Fraud Prevention Fund, as well as supposedly to Home M22. I wonder if any of you know what that specifically is. And then lastly, Council File number 16305, where money is being spent for capital expenditures. I can't agree more with Councilman Brzezinski when he made the statement that the ARP funds are just being thrown around. But unfortunately, for the poor in Erie, it's not being thrown in the direction in which it should be thrown in. There's stipulations that people have to meet to even qualify for these monies. But yet I saw where one of the council members received in excess of $6,000 for the purchase of T-shirts. And we have people living in this city in housing that should be condemned. The only way that I wouldn't want a house was when you see some of these houses that are for rent to the poor, where they're roach, rat, and bed bug infested. I too probably would prefer to live homeless. But in the Word of God, it says foxes have dens, birds have nests, but yet the Son of Man does not have a place in which to lay his head. And for this city to build $1,000 per month housing on West Side, and then we can't provide for the poor on the East Side, and yet we're a government for the people and not just for the few. And I also want to take the time to thank the police patrolman that patrols Fairmount Parkway. He's been catching a lot of speeders on this street, and I really want to thank him for that, because we have school children that are walking from school, and I really appreciate, as well as the rest of my neighbors, appreciate his presence. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Frank, there's no one else waiting to speak. Lori, I think we're done with public comment.
Okay, we can go to ordinances for final passage. Council File number 16312, official ordinance 53/2022, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $41,865.30 from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue for the expenditure thereof. Funding is from the Survey for Park and Streetscape Improvements. Sponsored by Mr. Nelson, seconded by Mr. Keys. The Council File Ordinance Bill number 16312, and now known as Official File Ordinance 53/2022, be finally passed by City Council. Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. City Council passed Official File Ordinance 53/2022 by yeas 7, nays 0. Ordinances for first reading. Council File number 16313, an ordinance of the city establishing stormwater management fees within the city of Erie. sponsored by Mr. Nelson, seconded by Mr. Keys. The council file ordinance number 16313, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by City Council. Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. City Council read and adopt council file ordinance 16313 by yeas 7, nays 0 on first reading.
Madam President, if I may say a word about that, this is the first reading on this. I asked in caucus questions, and I think I got the right answers. This is another fee. You know what I think about fees. That money will go into the stormwater fund, and it will be used exclusively for stormwater repair or whatever. As long as I'm alive, I'll be watching that fund very, very closely, because you know what I think about fees. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other comments on that? Mr. Nelson?
I think one of the things that, you know, I always take a look at what this does for my own finances, just as a plumb line of how it's going to affect residents. For me, if this was paid with property taxes, I'd pay $65, but instead I'm going to pay $24. And then I looked at the median house prices in Erie with the median house size, and your average resident, your average homeowner is going to be paying $12 instead of $45. So, I mean, I always like paying 0 more than 24, but I certainly like paying 24 more than 65. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm always appreciative of. And I'm not sure looking forward to paying 24 more, but certainly looking forward to the solutions, and that my street is less fun to play in when it rains.
And I do want to thank the representatives from Wood Consultants who attended our caucus today. All the council members, this has been a long process to get here. Thank the administration and also those who served on the Credit Advisory Committee to get us to the point of a first reading approval. So, okay, now we move to
New business.
New business. Do we want to move the balance and do separations?
Madam Chair, I move the balance.
Do we have a second? Mel moved to move the balance and Ed seconded. So,
any separations?
Separations.
One.
Number 5, a new business.
1.
And number 3, 4, under contracts. And the 3 transfers.
Okay, I have number 1. Number 5, a new business. Three and 4 on contracts is J. Thomas and Bentley.
Yes, J. Thomas and Bentley.
And 3 transfers.
One and 5 under new business, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And then the 3 transfers, and then 3 and 4 under contracts?
Sounds good.
Okay. So we can vote on the balance then.
Moving the balance of the agenda, Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. Okay. We have number 1. Sponsored by Ms. Allen, seconded by Mr. Keys. Resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the proper city officials are hereby authorized and directed to allow the custodian of the City of Erie Water Reserve Fund account to release the amount of $613,523 payable to the City of Erie Capital Fund. Discussion?
Yes, I think I'm probably separating this for the same reason that Councilman Keys is separating number 5. This was money that the city had planned on transferring, and according to our Title 51 Capital Expense Fund, it's a 4% annual withdrawal with 4 votes of City Council approval. However, with number 5, as Mike had Councilman Keys had separated it, that was unanticipated, unallocated ARP money that's now going towards the same fund. So that's something where the city had planned on taking $613,000 as allowed by our ordinances. Instead, we're also now adding 507 in addition to it. And so my thought is that we don't need to take this money out today. We could take it out literally any time in the future as needed. And in the meantime, it is our best performing fund in the city. So it's an opportunity to ideally grow in the future. Historically, it's grown at an 8% rate over the last 20 years. And it's so by leaving it in, we're likely to add 24,000 to our budget next year, and 25 to the budget the year after, and 26.2 the year after that. It's something that would continually grow based on historic trends. So I don't see why we'd have to do both transfers, other than to just spend more than we'd planned.
Is it okay if I ask Renee Lamus to respond? Because I think that we got a good explanation from the acting director of finance about these 2 separate things at our caucus this morning.
Sure, I can try to shed some light on that. So the $507,000 in ARP funding, the reason why we want to transfer that back into the capital fund is because we already depleted what we were going to spend in 2022, and we have additional needs for 2022 because a lot of the funding went into the building upgrades due to COVID. Lisa and Jackie, who are our ARP project manager and finance manager, checked with our auditor to ensure that that is an allowable expense. And so that $507,000 goes towards this year, and the $613,000 goes towards next year. We are in the process of working with department heads on creating a 5 to 6 year capital improvement plan. We have no bond funding left, which is what's typically been used for paving streets and other capital expenditures. We're trying not to float any additional bonds because in the long term, that's really bad business for our residents. And so there's an increased need for funding in the capital fund because we have a lot of deferred maintenance. There's over $1 million in repairs that need to be made to our firehouses that are high priority repairs that need to be made as soon as possible. Between that and paving alone and the capital improvements for public works, we have right now, we don't have the complete list done, but right now we have over $12 million in capital needs. So the $507,000 and the $1,613,000 are just a fraction of what we're going to have to try to come up with liquid fuels and CDBG funding and other funding as we work to scrape that together and not float any bonds.
Could you just also reiterate, I brought it along with me, but I confess I didn't have time to go back and look up the exact citation, but I do believe that the PFM report pointed out that one of our weaknesses is the lack of a real capital funding. Yes. I do think that, Chuck brings up some good points. I just think it's something that we should wrestle with and come up with some intermediate and longer term solutions as we look at the budget for 2023 and beyond, but could you just remind people
Yeah.
about, or not
Yes,
so much
let's-
remind those who weren't here, what PFM reported, pointed out to us
Yes.
as a real weakness for
Yeah,
the
that's
city.
correct. They noted that the, vast majority of the city's general fund goes to pay salaries and benefits. And the reason that's the case is because we're not investing in our infrastructure, we're not maintaining, we're not regularly taking care of the things that need to be maintained. And so that's why we're ending up with so many stormwater issues with, pipes underground that nobody sees, but they're crumbling because they haven't been maintained. That's just one example. Of course, that will all be paid through the stormwater fee. We're using ARP funding. We're going after grants. We're doing a lot to try to find other funding to take care of as much as we can. But there are a lot of needs that just haven't been taken care of over the years, and that's what PFM was reflecting on in the report.
May I speak to that, Madam President? The PFM report is why I suggest this today. This fund is our best resource to fund those capital projects. And as we deplete it by $613,000 today, we could be using the sources that we have in the funds. The mayor had suggested investing the money taken from water prepayments. We could use some of that for capital funds and get ahead on that while this fund builds to address future issues. And at that point, if we do have a deficit because of this, because of that money depleting too quickly, we can take the money back out of this fund in the future with the council approval. This is just a matter of us making sure that the one thing that we have to actually fund capital improvements has an opportunity to grow in this time where the city has more money in the bank than we've ever had historically.
I think based on the conversation that we had, or the sit-down we had with the advisor to the Water Reserve Fund, we know that it's been pretty steady. I don't think deplete is the right word to use, and I am worried about doing something on the fly when we have, this is the practice that we've used. Maybe we need to have a better practice, but I'm open to talking about this for next year, but we're going to get ourselves in a jam if we're revising our capital budget on the dais today.
We are revising our capital budget by taking $507 from ARP unallocated money that we didn't know we were going to have when you made the budget last year. So I'm just looking to use that to replace this.
That's
Now,
not
the other
gonna
thing,
replace this,
the
though.
other thing is that we don't, if we don't take the money out today, that doesn't mean we can't take it out in December. This isn't an on-the-fly action. Actually taking it out is an on-the-fly action. As you'd said, we sat down with the advisor and you and I discussed it afterwards. I discussed it with the mayor as early as March. This is stuff that we have had conversations about previous to the 2 minutes that were left of caucus and on the floor today. There is room to do this and time where...
I believe that the advisor, though, did not, in fact, I contacted him yesterday, and he did not say one way or the other. He didn't give his blessing to your plan.
So, we all know what's happening on the stock market. And so this fund is the only fund that the city has that's in the market, other than the pension. Well, I mean, as far as we use in our capital budget, that we have at disposal for our capital budget. And so if it's down 16% from the 11, so they say the worst time to take your money is when you're down. And if we're down $1 million plus, why would we take the money today when in 3 weeks we can have our $1 million back? We don't know, but we won't have it back because we took this $600,000 out, and we won't get the Chuck knows all the fancy words, but we won't get the compounded payment money, back on top of it. So I agree that this is a one or the other, because that this is a one or the other, because I don't agree with us taking the money today for the capital projects. A lot of them that we're talking about, there are other buckets that the money can be taken out of if necessary. And so the realization is that those other buckets do exist. And even if they have been slated to go somewhere else, it still furthers the mission of the organizations that were in line to receive it. And so I say that use the money that you have been allocated to fund your own upgrades in vehicles and equipment.
You referred to fancy words of a council person, and I guess I would prefer to rely on the fancy words of the acting finance director who recommended that we do this.
Yeah, she just texted me, excuse me.
Can you read it loudly?
She said our 5-year earnings on the Water Reserve Fund are 5.4%, 3-year 3.5%, negative 18% year-to-date. The market would have to turn around significantly to produce 10% earnings.
The 10% is based on our 20-year outlook, which is a much more accurate understanding of the.
Except that right now what we're going through is not a predictable situation.
Historic trends are, I mean,
we have
historic trends are much better identified
increasing-
outside of a 1-year trend.
We have a lot of increasing costs with chemicals, with liquid fuels, utilities. This is an unprecedented time right now, and we have significant capital improvements that need to be made. So I just caution you all to think through that.
Unless
we have no bond money to fall
unless
back on.
$1.2 million is being spent in the next 2 weeks on capital expenses, then we can float it for 2 weeks and leave it in. That's really my argument here, is that unless $1.2 million is being spent in the next 2 weeks, we should be okay. We may want to bring this back up in December or next year. The council has the ability over this.
Are you talking about 2 weeks or December or 2023?
As needed.
It's needed.
Call for the question. I think we beat this to death already. Hello, Lori. Earth to Lori.
I have a question.
Lord, I'd like you to entertain a motion to table number 5.
Okay, well, let's vote on this thing first, huh? You vote on this first?
Voting on the resolution, Mr. Brzezinski?
No.
Ms. Flores?
No.
Mr. Keys?
No.
Mr. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Troop? Mr. Witherspoon? Ms. Allen? Motion fails to pass 3-4. I'm wondering, I don't think we can take a table now, can we?
No, if we vote this, it called for the question. I was out of order. They had called for the question already.
On number 5? Okay, this is number 5, sponsored by Ms. Allen, seconded by Mr. Keys. Resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the proper city officials are hereby authorized and directed to ratify and confirm that the American Rescue Act funds in the amount of $507,264,000 be allocated to the city.
Lori, it wasn't
It's
507 million.
$507,264.
We're living in a Taj Mahal.
I know, I looked at Renee, waiting. Be allocated to the City of Erie Capital Fund to reimburse the building upgrades to City Hall. Be it further resolved, City Council does hereby ratify and confirm the said transaction to be charged against the budget code 036-2140-0000-5093. Discussion?
I'm in favor of this passing now because we just made sure we needed it.
Madam President, one of the confusions, I think, a meeting or two ago, I brought up unappropriated and unanticipated money. When we had a normal budget, people understood that. Today, with money going this way and that way and that way and around this way, the only answer we got from the esteemed Esquire Betza was that it's good money because it's coming out. That's not a good answer, but I only bring it up because I bring it up, and I vote yes on this.
Can I answer? Because basically unappropriated and unanticipated means that we're getting a grant that we weren't sure we were going to get.
Well, why didn't you tell me that when I asked
We're
a month
applying,
ago?
I can tell, we have pages and pages and pages of grants that we're applying for. We're working really hard to get as much federal and state funding as we can.
Well, I'm happy for
and
that.
we'll be updating you all on that as they come in, but that's basically
I would
what's
hope we
happening.
get updated before the
Oh,
hammer hits. Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's inaccurate. The $507,264 is the of unallocated ARP money that is said is going toward building upgrades. And it's not. I don't know why it's labeled as building upgrades when, you know, it's deceptively put there where we're paying for building upgrades that we paid for 2 years ago. We're not paying for building upgrades. It's a way of moving money so that you have more money to do something else with that's not on this paper. And so until I know what we are going to do with this money, because we already have our building upgrades, I'm a no, and I'm also admonishing the administration for transparency and honesty.
I had a lot of questions about that, which is, so this is when the security system was installed, they had not planned on using ARP money, which meant we depleted the capital budget to an area that you and Ed were not comfortable with. You know, and I recall you guys voting no on that. So they're now replenishing the capital budget to a point that everyone should be comfortable with. However, a depleted capital budget is something that some had voted in favor of back when that vote occurred. So the question you asked as to what the administration is going to do with it, well, we just, as council, since we control the budget, made sure that the water reserve fund wasn't depleted and that our capital budget was still healthy to the extent that council was comfortable with 2 years ago or a year ago when they passed the security system. But we just tightened that in.
Yeah, I would quickly we're reimbursing the account. That's what the wording is, to reimburse from the building upgrades, we're not trying to be deceitful here. As Mr. Nelson just explained, we depleted the capital fund with the building upgrades that we completed in 2021. And so this is an allowable expense for ARP funding, and we're reimbursing that account because we have a lot of other capital needs that need to be taken care of.
Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted transparent, and it does not say reimbursement here. And not on my agenda, it doesn't.
It says on number 5, it says, to be allocated to the City of Erie Capital Fund to reimburse building upgrades to City Hall.
Are we ready to vote?
On the transfer, but it says it in the new business on number 5 on the resolution.
Call for question.
Voting on the resolution, Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. Resolution passes yea 7, nay 0. Going to contracts. No transfers first, okay. Okay, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie, the following amounts be and they hereby transferred in the Department of Finance American Rescue Act funds $130,150 from ARPA Project Parks to Tree Improvement Project. Discussion?
Yeah, once again, making sure I haven't missed anything, so we're taking money from the parks for tree improvement project, and there's 2 line items here where we're supposed to be where we're using ARP unallocated or parks funds to do so. And I have a problem with this for 2 reasons. One, I don't believe cutting down trees is an acceptable use of ARP money. Number 2, it's coming out of the parks funds. When City Council allocated $5 million for the parks, we wanted the parks to get $5 million. We did not want the parks to get $4.1 million and $900,000 appropriated to something else. And number 2, while we're waiting on the park surveys and these 2 come in, I'm against spending any money that's allocated to the parks until we get a complete, comprehensive overlay of what projects are going to be done at the parks.
Renee, do you have any comment on this or information that can help?
I guess I would just say that these projects are in the parks. It's not just about removing trees, but it's about maintaining the urban forest and ensuring that our trees are healthy. But I mean, I defer to council on how you want to proceed with that.
I'm sorry, can you clarify that real quick? You said that these projects are in the parks. The tree cutting, the tree removal, that's...
A lot of them in the city-owned parks and public spaces, which is what the survey is on.
So public space, that's still like residential properties though, right? Just to clarify this, from my own understanding, my understanding was that there was some public space, like in the residential communities. So where exactly are the trees being cut down?
I don't have a map for these specific trees. I don't know if that's already been denoted or not. I don't know. I don't think any
of the trees. They're not in the parks.
The trees that
and
are.
I met with the arborist.
Okay. For this specific 130,000.
Is there more money going towards trees?
Well, there's 600,000 for cutting trees down. This is the first tranche of cutting the trees down, and so with stipulation that because there's already 2 contracts, east side and west side, if you go down into the contracts. And so with stipulation that trees will be within 1 block of a city park, I think that we could amend this. If we are gonna start at our city parks and use the parks money, it should be used at the parks.
I agree.
I would like to use one of those old expressions about seeing the forest for the trees or the trees for the forest, but again, I think this is one of the things where we have to rely on the expertise of those who know what they're talking about in terms of tree removal, reforestation, what the Urban Forest Committee is doing. If council wants to be an expert on all things, I guess I'm astounded
Actually,
Would you have thought of sharing that map with us before 10 to 11 on the morning of the council meeting, the map that you have? Can you email that to everybody right now so we can take a look at whatever information you have that is guiding your vote?
I can just add, the Director of Public Works is texting, they're all within the right-of-way in the city's qualified census tracts.
so now we're getting to, but not in or near the parks necessarily.
Well, the funding is for parks
I
and
think
public
it's in my other
spaces.
phone, my map.
I think, you know, questions in advance helps us because we can provide more clarity. I'm not an expert in every single department. I apologize.
We don't have to be an expert on any of these things, only that we allocated money for parks and it's not going to the park. I don't need to be an expert.
Right, the allocation was for improvements to parks and public spaces.
And right-of-way is a public space,
Exactly,
correct?
yes. City right-of-way.
Can I suggest that we put a Zen-10 in my boulevard then?
Madam President, I have two citizens that constantly called me about trees. One is Paul Gamble, 23rd and Holland. Quite a few years ago, the city planted trees there, and the type of trees that were planted, the roots follow where the water's at, and therefore it brought up the sidewalks, plus it's now moving toward his house and getting ready to mess with the foundation. Now, we planted the trees, and we should know the type of trees that the roots grow and travel. Then there's another gentleman on the East 20th Street with the same situation. Now, I understand Councilman Keys, if it's in the budget for a specific purpose, then it should be used for a specific purpose. But we need to make sure that the citizens, especially where we planted the trees, we need to make sure that their concern is taken care of as well.
Mr. Witherspoon, I don't disagree with you there. I do have some experience in this because I had one of those rogue trees in my right-of-way that busted up my sidewalk, and I was told I had to remediate it and fix my sidewalk at my own expense. That was the city's position.
That I understand, sir. I did the same thing. Matter of fact, I cut my tree down because I didn't want the roots to continue to move toward my house. Understand, sir.
Well, coincidentally, I just went on a tree walk in Lawrence Park, and I wrote about it for today's Erie Reader. And we went with an arborist who pointed out that we were looking at a park, a public park, not in the city of Erie, but was pointing out the dangers of dead trees, dying trees to people who are walking under them. So,
Madam President?
I think that are you going to call the question?
Good.
I'm ready to call if you're ready to call.
No, I'm ready to talk for a second if I could.
Okay.
You know, we're not dealing with dead trees, live trees, growing trees under sidewalks. These are all real things. What we're really talking about is we don't know. There's why don't we just get a piece of paper before a meeting sometime so that we can find out what we're spending it on? I don't have a problem with the different things that we're doing here with the trees. Like I said, Paul Gamble, he doesn't complain very often. He's a good guy. So if he's got a problem there, he's got a problem. But what I'm saying is that we're all sitting here, and Mike, I hate to admit it, but sometimes he has a good point. We don't know. We don't know where this money's going. We're supposed to sit back here as a council and say, okay, you tell us, and then we'll say yes. I'm getting tired of saying yes. Unappropriated and anticipated funds. I'm done. Am I right or what? I mean, you guys are all looking at me and smiling. Tell the story. I mean, it's not that tough to give us a Reader's Digest so we know what we're talking about, because we don't.
Well, I think we usually get pretty thorough memos on various things on our agenda. I know that there's a lot to read, and I try to keep up with them. I don't know if we had a memo on the transfers for the trees.
Sarah Peelman had included a memo. It's not explicit, in its detail, but it does mention that 26 dead and hazardous trees and stumps are to be removed in the City of Erie Parks and Right-of-Ways by J. Thomas Tree Service at a price of $40,750, and then 34 dead and hazardous trees and stumps are to be removed within the city parks and right-of-ways by Bentley Tree Care at a cost of $62,400. And at any time, if there are questions, we're happy to provide whatever additional detail is required for you to make a good decision.
I would think this would also be timely. I mean, I don't think we want to be taking these trees down once snow comes. I could be wrong. I'm not a tree expert, but.
I'm curious. I wasn't here for the bucket process for y'all, so like I see how the funding allocated for public parks and public spaces was set on the city website, and $5 million for public space improvements, and it does have $600,000 for dead trees and public right-of-way. Did you guys vote on the budget when it was just $5 million, or did you guys get that breakdown back in October, November when you were voting on this? I don't personally know.
I think it was explained that it was unallocated funds. It was money in a bucket.
Yeah.
Where, they would come and get the money for certain specific things. That's where the break in the communication comes in.
Yeah, is that how y'all recall it? I mean, I'm genuinely curious. Because I could see if that wasn't how it was described, how Mike would be concerned. But if the rest of you recall that, oh yeah, this bucket, here's what was going to be in it. But I wasn't here for that one yet.
So, I don't know. If let's digress and say APR money that's supposed to help the ARP money that's supposed to help the people who've been marginalized, disenfranchised, and most hurt by COVID. I think at the very last of my list is you cutting down my tree.
I think that when we're talking about parks and public spaces, and we're talking about public safety, I think you don't want a tree to fall on your head if you are able to take advantage of the public spaces that we're trying to improve so that people have access to good outdoor spaces. But I guess we'll agree to disagree. Can we vote on this?
There's three things here that we got to talk about, right?
Do you want to table all the transfers and the tree contracts, and then we can come back when's our next meeting going to be? October 19th? Yeah. And maybe we'll have some snowfall by then, and maybe we can decide we know everything there is to know about trees. I don't care what we do, vote it or table it, but can we move on?
Let's vote on it, Madam President.
Madam President, how about the building security upgrades? What else can we upgrade? Can have machine gun areas to protect us?
We passed that. So I think now we have to transfer.
Yeah, oh, all right. Yes, that's my vote.
Voting on the resolution?
Transfers.
What are we voting on? Are we doing the three transfers one by one? Is that correct? Or are we doing them all at once?
Can we do that?
Still separate. The voting costs us an extra 5 minutes.
third transfer has already been approved and voted upon, so I would move for the first two.
I didn't hear you.
The third transfer is also the contract number 5 that's been passed by council. The resolution for the contract of 507,264. That's already been voted upon.
The building upgrades.
Right.
Yes.
So that transfer is off the table.
Okay, are we motioning to table or are we voting?
We're gonna vote.
Voting on the resolutions, the transfer of 150,000. Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores,
No.
Mr. Keys,
No.
Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. Motion passes 5-2. Okay, this is a transfer in the amount of $139,000 from ARPA unallocated funds to the digital infrastructure software upgrade. Discussion?
Just that I thought that we had already paid for our digital upgrades during the last year, and we had a budget. It said it was going to cost this much, and now we have another $139,000 here, and I don't know why.
That allocation from before was for the planning department. This is for the finance department. We're upgrading, under contracts, you can see the Time Clock Plus LLC. We're going to be having new software that will enable us to do timekeeping and payroll in a much more efficient and effective manner.
So, will this cost us to use less manpower and be a cost savings to the city?
That's what we're anticipating.
Is this the same circumstance since this was voted on? Number 11?
This hasn't been.
Or number 1 in contracts?
They've already approved, yeah.
Should we anticipate additional requests for funding for each department that's going to be needing, since we were, as of right now, this is the second department? Or wherever we're upgrading?
I think, Renee, aren't we going to get a grant from the state for the second phase of the
Public
intervention report that will focus on digital needs?
Yeah, Public Works applied for a $200,000 Phase 2 funding from the STAMP grant. We're expecting to hear on that very soon, and that's for upgrades to Public Works so that we can digitize everything and get it all into GIS.
And I did want to say, I know Public Works is thinking about this. I mentioned there's those little signs out there that actually have council members who are no longer on council, kind of right near where Kathy Schaaf is sitting across from there. If you go out there, you're going to see that Kaz Kwiatkowski is still on there, and I don't know who else, but so those are those little letters from like long ago, and Public Works said yesterday they're looking, now I don't know if this has to do with the digital upgrades, but I just want to stress that Public Works is really thinking how we come into the modern era, and they're looking at signs that can be digitally changed, so we don't have those little letters. So everybody go out and look at the little letters after the meeting, and you'll say, wow, didn't know this was still a thing. So probably not relevant to this, but I am impressed by the way Public Works is trying to be on the leading edge of things instead of living in the 50s. So when I was born. All right, so Are we going to vote on this one now?
Voting on the resolution, Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. Motion passes yeas 7, nays 0. So now we're looking at contracts. Number 3.
Do we still have to vote on the transfer since that was? We still have to vote on the transfer for the next one since it was separated, even though we already approved it. Do we still have to vote to that? Michael separated that one too.
Wasn't that the vote that you just approved the transfer? That was the vote approving.
She's talking about this one.
Number 3, that voted is, you approved the contract, so.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need to vote on
Thanks.
that.
Sorry.
Okay, so I think this is the resolution that the proper city officials are hereby authorized and directed to issue an agreement to J. Thomas Tree Service for tree and stump removal at various locations on the west side for the Department of Shade Tree at a total cost of $40,750. Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. Number 14, the proper city officials are hereby authorized and directed to issue an agreement to Bentley Tree Care for tree and stump removal at various locations on the east side for the Department of Shade Tree at a total cost of $62,400. No more discussion? Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon, Ms. Allen. Resolution passes yeas 7, nays 0. This takes us to committee reports.
Madam Chair, I would like to ask the administration regarding the asphalt replacement on the east side. Ask your department to please consider Mr. Barry Clark's street in repaving, since you'll be over on that side of town. Thank you.
Okay, committee reports. Should we? I don't know what happened at the last meeting that I wasn't here, but can we start with? Okay. Let's start with the person on the tracks, Mr. Nelson. We'll go this way.
Hang on one second, boss. Didn't we separate 3 and 4?
We did 3 and 4. I think she just.
Did we vote on 4 too? Both at the same time? I just was wondering why we had a company from New York State taking care of our tree stumps on the east side. I'm sure there's enough people here in the city that could do the job. I'm sure that Thomas is a big outfit, probably could have done the whole thing. I just questioned that. I didn't know we voted for both of them at the same time. Good thing to save time and have short meetings. I'd like that. 4? I must have taken a nap. All right. Never saw it. Old age, you know. I still don't know why. I had to go to New York State.
They were the lowest bidder.
All right, so committee report.
He's going back.
Okay. Do we want to get him first then?
He doesn't have a report.
All right.
Right?
Yeah, all right.
See you later,
Right.
Mr. Troop.
All right, so I'm the liaison for the Water Authority. The last Water Authority meeting, they did throw around the idea, because they set their rates 5 years at a time, they did throw around the idea of an emergency increase because of the chemical costs that have gone up in this season of time of 1%. So not very dramatic, and it's just being thrown around at this point. Yeah, I just wanted to make council know, familiar with that. On an exciting note with them, there is going to be an event tomorrow with Penvest Investment. that the Water Authority got a significant amount of money. There will be a red, I had to check my calendar, there's going to be a ribbon cutting at 2 o'clock tomorrow. It's up on East Score Road at that pump station. In addition, I last week met with members of Public Works and then the regional head of the SCAPE project, or also known as the Tony Hawk Foundation. They were talking about improvements to Columbus Park, which is one of our qualified census tracts. Reminding everyone to fill out the surveys as there's a couple days left on it. But it looks like we may be able to do like quadruple leveraging on ARP funds to get that park updated. There's been a huge demand on it with the surveys. It looks like ARP money may be matched dollar for dollar with Tony Hawk, which may be matched dollar for dollar with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So we're talking what could be $100,000 of city expense turning into a $400,000 improvement, anywhere from 100 to 400,000, quadruple. So those were the main things regarding my committee. In regards to the water, stormwater management, it's a little bit off topic, but I think relevant to the point. We are going to be charging businesses and nonprofits based on their impervious surfaces. And with that, it may be a good time in the near future to review our parking minimum standards. This is something that, if you look at the studies of this in the last 54 years, since Donald Shoup came to some notoriety, there's pretty much arbitrary numbers assigned to how many parking spots a bowling alley has to have in Erie. And all the cities pretty much copied those arbitrary numbers from back in the 50s, except in January, South Bend got rid of it. A couple days later, Sacramento, Berkeley shortly thereafter. Minneapolis got rid of it in May. St. Paul got rid of it in August. Richmond, Raleigh, San Diego, cities all over the nation are getting rid of that requirement. If we're going to be charging these businesses based on an arbitrary number from the early 20th century, I think it may be time to review that and maybe go the way of some of these more forward-minded cities and just scrap the thing pretty soon here. But just throwing it out there, since we're going to be charging for it here in the near future, if that passes again, I'd like that to be addressed, and probably something I should discuss in caucus, but I'd throw it out there for the general public as well. Thank you. That ends my report.
Chuck, I don't know if you heard from, but there's a Gannon student who's very interested in parking.
Had lunch with him at Calamari a couple months ago.
Yeah, so, yeah, it'd be good to get a young person involved in that too, and I suggested that he come to, when possible, to some of the planning commission meetings and, zoning hearing to hear about that. So thank you for bringing that up. Mel?
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to let the public know, as well as council, that on Saturday, Miss Liz, the late Liz Robertson, will be going into the Golf Hall of Fame. The event was originally scheduled to be held at Lakeview Golf Country Club, but the ticket sales skyrocketed, so they had to move it to the Ambassador. She's the wife of Mr. Tom Robertson, who was the teacher and coach at then Academy High. It should be a great event. I'm not sure if any tickets are still available, but I just wanted to make mention of that. She will be the first African-American female to go into the Golf Hall of Fame here in Erie. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
I attended the Airport Authority meeting last week. Our airport is undergoing some stress. It's been made public, but we hope that they get it all resolved and it doesn't affect our airport's short-term or long-term viability as an asset to our community. Other than that, I attended the forest meeting, the Urban Forest Committee, and I sat in with our arborists and the panel for, during their meeting, and we had a good discussion also about some other things that may be at play in the future, but I am interested in, our green spaces and maximizing them. I'm not an arborist or anything. I just want us to get the best bang for our bucks for the money that we're using.
Yasmin?
For my committee report, I have that we have had about 10 people submit resumes for the blighted property appointment, so I'm going to be going through those. I'm hoping to have that situated in the coming weeks. I also wanted to mention that we did declare its support for the 25-year chart for the EMTA Transit Authority, so I'm hoping that we can provide quality service to our residents to fit the work schedules that would require if you're using, public transportation to get to and from employment. I wanted to highlight the fact that Erie County is roughly a medium income community of the low end of $22,000 and the high end of $38,000. When you're renting, you have to prove 3 times your income in order to qualify to actually receive the housing. So I just want, developers to keep in mind that the Erie community is of low income mostly. The people you're trying to appease to be able to afford the housing is not going to be the actual community members that are currently here, just because the wages that are in place just aren't realistic for a $1,000 rent or a $2,000 rent. In order to prove that, you have to be able to bring home over $6,000 to even get into the apartment. I also wanted to shed light that on Saturday, October 8th, between noon and 4, Erie's Women's March is going to be going on. I'm working with a line of phenomenal women to bring awareness to women issues. So if you would like to come down and spread support for women in our community who are business owners, we have 15 spots for food trucks and a variety of local vendors who will be there. We did not have a vending fee because we would like all proceeds to go to the women who are business owners who are impacted as a result of pandemic. So thank you and hope to see you there.
Ed?
Yeah, I have very little. I talked to the Port Authority folks. All the projects there are going along. Some of them are going along a little more slowly than they want because of the same old story we heard from everybody. Because of the pandemic, they can't get the supplies that they need. But that being said, we're pushing things back maybe to April for the Bayfront Road. Different things going on there. They have a national search going out to replace Ms. Sandberg, which nobody will be able to replace her. She was a pretty good lady down there. Johnny Mulligan is doing the work right now until they find somebody else. And I wonder if it's me, because the convention authority that I'm with too, Mr. Wells is retiring. I didn't do it too. Both of them, I like them both. I wanted them both there. But it's time for them to go on to different places. And I think they're deciding right now at the convention center if they were gonna go with a national search for Casey or if they're gonna promote somebody inside. Either way, I'm sure they'll do the right thing. The last thing I have is 38th and Liberty. The gentleman that spoke did a pretty good job. He's very emotional about that because he was in an accident in that area. But other folks have complained. And as I said earlier, I pulled in there, I don't know why, I think we wanted to get a lottery ticket to lose again. But anyway, my wife and I were there and I needed her eyes plus my eyes just to maneuver the parking lot. It's a lot of building with not a whole lot of space to move around. And then getting in and out of either Liberty or 38th Street, it's gonna be a nightmare until we get it fixed up. I promised him and I promised a number of other folks that are around the Tops Marketplace in that area that we would be very studious in getting the facts put together for that corner and hopefully getting it fixed up before somebody does lose his life there. It's not good. I didn't see the accident, but I saw Eddie's Collectible yanking this, whatever was left of his car, onto his truck to get it out of there. That's not anybody's real fault. You're coming up Liberty, and all of a sudden, the street kind of disappears. And it is dangerous, and like I said, I talked to the chief, and he's going to be looking at it too. So other than that, say good night. I'm done.
Don't leave yet, though, okay? I just had a couple of notes. One is that I hope everyone, and actually I want to thank Freda Tepfer, who was updating me on what was going on at the county council meeting last night about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you know what is being done there with attempts to reallocate ARP funding. I hope everybody pays attention to that. We're at a critical point in Erie where we finally have embraced, you heard Curtis Jones talking about the Erie Regional Chamber offering scholarships so that people can attend the homecoming, and also being very intentional about DEI, and yet we have an attempt somewhere else to get rid of that. We know that DEI isn't just the right thing to do morally and ethically, it's good business to have a diverse workforce, a diverse community. So pay attention to that. I know Mr. Brzezinski has talked a lot about, you know, how do you move people into becoming owners of housing and not just, as opposed to renters. So I noticed a good story in the Housing Authority newsletter, FSS First Time Home Buyer. So I hope everybody on council reads that. The other thing, I'm not sure if everybody on council got a link to the in-depth report that Court Gould did for the Jefferson Educational Society on housing. He recommends a housing summit. One of the things that, you know, I talked earlier about recommendations from the PFM report that we still need to follow up on. But if you go back to Erie Refocused, one of the recommendations there was to establish a blight court or a housing court. And I believe he talked about that in there. He talked about many of the things that Jasmine has mentioned about affordable housing. I know I met with somebody I work with at the Erie Seawolves who wanted to change his housing, and he has a number of different disabilities, and I went and looked at one application program, and it was 14 pages long. So I understand more about how the bureaucracy works and the hurdles that those who are looking for permanent housing have to deal with. So if council would take a look at that, I think that would be a really good topic for us to address, especially as we have a new planning director in place who has made one of his top priorities, or his first priority, to look at code enforcement. So I think we're going to be moving forward here. I'm wondering, I hope council can start thinking, I think Renee will tell us, do we get the budget at the next meeting? We're going to get the budget. Let's think about, traditionally, at least since I've been on here, it's been, we have study sessions based on, you know, department heads. I don't know if we might want to talk to Lisa about how we want to proceed with looking at the budget. It sounds like everybody has a lot of good questions they want to ask about the budget. Might we want to do some more topical kind of sessions on, you know, we always do revenue and expenses, but, you know, personnel, you know, where the numbers are, where the needs are. So let's think about that so that we can have really good, fruitful study sessions on the budget. I'm also thinking, I know that there is frustration. We have a half an hour of caucus before we come in at both meetings, but there seems to be more time at night than in the morning when we come in at 8:30, then we have to come out here at 9 o'clock. I know Mr. Brzezinski last year had tried to get us to think about maybe doing more of what the school board does, which is a committee of the whole meeting the week before the meeting. Because we have so many questions, and you know, it's obvious that we want to make sure we're making good decisions. I think that maybe for next year we ought to really think, do we need an additional meeting to make sure that we know what's coming up, and we can ask and probe about all those questions. So let's think about how we're structured and how we can become more, ask the questions, get the answers, probe, make the right decisions. So that's all. And then Teresa, do you go next?
Yeah, just to let council know that the 2022 MMO has been satisfied. We've got our check from the state and the final money from the city. So, and you have 2023's MMO. And then there's an aggregate board meeting next month in November.
Thank you, Teresa. And then
Nothing to report.
nothing else
Madam.
to add. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your help on the public hearing and everything. Really appreciate that.
I have a few things. I appreciate members of council reminding people about the park survey. We're going to keep that open till end of day on October 17th. I just wanted to report so far we've had 10,724 total page visits to the site. We're very excited about that. There have been 1,547 survey submissions. Just to remind people, these priorities could be related to bicycle infrastructure in terms of implementing the Active Erie Transportation Plan, pedestrian infrastructure, funds for crosswalks, safer routes to school, sidewalk repair at city-owned property, pedestrian signage, public art, sculpture, murals, monuments, mosaics, park improvements, so playgrounds, athletic fields, security cameras, walking paths, dog parks, picnic tables, benches, gazebos, splash pads, street trees, planting and maintenance, and streetscaping in terms of benches or planter boxes, neighborhood signage, historic signage, tree planting. So just ask people to share their input by end of day on October 17th. This is the first round of input that we're seeking. Then we'll take a couple of months to go through the data and kind of develop sketches of what some of these things might look like and cost them out. And then residents will get a chance to vote again in January in terms of actual dollar figures where we're going to put the funding. We also still have the link to the authorities, boards, and commissions open. We've got a lot of applications coming in to be reviewed, but we're keeping that open as well. I also wanted to make sure that people know that the Healthy Homes grants through the Redevelopment Authority are still open. That's $3.1 million in ARP funding that was allocated to the Redevelopment Authority for lead hazard control and Healthy Homes program. People can apply for that through the Redevelopment Authority, but there's also additional funding that's going to be coming available very soon for increasing blight removal, new housing production, rental investment, homeowner rehab loans. There are a lot of things that are going to be coming available, so it's just they kind of learned from our mistake of opening up everything at the same time, and they're doing one at a time. I also wanted to just let council know three more things, sorry. Coffee with a Cop is today from 10 to 2. This is a national event that we collaborate with. From 10 to 2, we'll have officers at the Tim Hortons on East 12th, and at Mill Creek Brewing on West 38th. Also, we have a study session next Tuesday, October 11th, with Chris Groner to provide an update on Quinty and EMI at Savacchio Park and the other DECD ARP funds. And then we're going to be requesting a study session in November. We've been working with our consultants on the $2.9 million home ARP funding that we received. The consultants have been doing focus groups. I know council was invited to those since June, stakeholder interviews, getting input from service providers, those who shelter the homeless, and are working on developing kind of a draft document for us to review with you in November. And then there would be a public hearing, I believe it's set for Monday, December 5th at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. if I'm not mistaken, but we want to have a study session with you in November and with the consultants. And then finally, on the housing issue, I wanted to let you know that we are meeting in a very comprehensive way. This kind of came out of the investment playbook. Housing was a critical need, as is homelessness. And so there are 2 different delivery teams that are meeting. The group on housing has its 3rd meeting next week. And this includes the Housing Authority, the Redevelopment Authority, HANDS, all the neighborhood groups, the Erie Community Foundation, the city, the Community Land Trust. And so what we're looking at is how to very strategically look at our property conditions assessment, which properties in each neighborhood are blighted, which properties in each neighborhood could be acquired and fixed up, and how we can work to provide financial literacy training, first-time home buyer training, so that we can move more people into home ownership. And so you may have seen, in addition to the Housing Authority, right now Sisters of St. Joseph have openings for their Genesis program, in which they acquire homes, they fix them up, and then they put people through training so that they can become first-time home buyers, and part of their rent is escrowed and used for their down payment when they're ready to purchase a home. So the idea of the Community Land Trust, just briefly, there's a lot that's going into that. A lot of, all the neighborhood groups are involved, the Redevelopment Authority, the Land Bank. It's a way to make sure that as the neighborhoods are fixing up these homes, that they stay affordable for people going into the future. So that's just a very short update on that. But that's moving forward, and as we have developments, we'll be updating council.
Renee, I wondered when you mentioned the playbook, and maybe Frank is around there. I know on the briefing yesterday, Frank talked about what's going to be on the mayor's press conference tomorrow and then next week, and I think it'd be good to let council know, because I know we can't always attend the press conference, but it sounded like some good or positive, I mean, always positive news coming out of those, but I think they might be interested in learning what's coming up.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Tomorrow's press conference focuses on Hispanic Heritage Month again, and then next week's press conference will be an update on the investment playbook, kind of what we're working on now, what's coming up next. Kind of clarify, I think there's been some confusion regarding the playbook. I think people think that there's this pot of money, this $1.1 billion that can be used for community projects. That's not what the playbook is. The playbook is basically our to-do list. In working with our consultant, Bruce Katz, we identified the federal and state funding that was going to be coming available, what projects would be eligible, and then we looked at the city and at the county to determine what made the most sense for us to apply for, what were our highest priorities. And so really the playbook is our to-do list for applying for federal and state funding. So we're going to clarify that at next week's press conference, and also kind of provide an update on some city grants that we've just been notified that we received.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? So do we have an ask into the Bloomberg Foundation, or what projects we're looking for in collaboration with them?
I'm not sure specifically to what you're referring, but as part of the program that the mayor and I and Chris Groner attended, it's a year-long program, we applied for assistance with housing and homelessness. I don't know if that's what you're referring to specifically.
Is that what our big ask is, help with homelessness?
Housing and homelessness. So we're waiting to hear back. We're supposed to hear in October whether or not we were selected to proceed.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order? If not, adjourned.
City Council adjourns at 11:31 a.m. Ms. Allen, Mr. Brzezinski, Ms. Flores, Mr. Keys, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Troop, Mr. Witherspoon.